I've been working on this. This has been my demo project for the past, I think it's 4 years. The only time I worked on it was when I was demonstrating. I did a little bit of line work and a couple other things when I wasn't, but it's been my demonstration at fairs, at the Museum of the Bible, at the Scarborough Renaissance Festival, at the Texas Renaissance Festival, but it has been like I've only worked on it during demonstrations. I finally got to the point at the end of Scarborough where I was ready with everything except black outlining on all of the pages, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to work on it in the off season. We've given up TRF, so I'm going to work on this. And so there's a lot, and so I'm going to give, we'll do a bigger tour. I still have to bind it. It's still just loose pages, but I've scanned it, I've digitized it, and there's a lot, there's a lot of hours. Today we're cutting book boards. Although I have my cool like historic hold down tools, it's not quite enough on the edge, and I could make something to do it, but I don't have enough time. Also, I didn't really make the saw either. I'm using a Japanese pull saw because it does the job I need it to do. So the process here is I am working on carving out channels with the chisel to open up a slot to put in a strap on these boards. And so these are the book boards for the prints of the Song of Solomon that I'm working on, and I'm going to carve out this little channel. There's additional areas carved for the straps, but this one specifically is for the closer strap, so they can attach to the back of these book boards and be able to wrap all the way around and close the book. And so I'm using a mallet and a chisel to carve these out. I did a little bit of pre-sawing initially as best I could. Last step in this carving process is actually to widen things out just a little bit and make sure that everything fits. And so it's not quite big enough for the strap width. So this is what I'm measuring everything to, and so strap width fits just fine. However, I need to carve a little bit deeper to get this to work out. So where we are right now is wedging and pinning the book. And so I have finished up the boards. I carved channels for it, both in this corner. I've rounded the edges. I have cut a channel for the strap, and then the split leather cords, or the leather thongs, actually come through and lay in those recessed channels, and then take wooden wedges and a little bit of wheat paste to go with that, and wedge all of that together and let it dry. And what I'm doing right now is I am cutting these pins off to kind of smooth them out, and to make it so that this kind of winged looking book will actually close once I trim all of those pins. And then I have to wedge in my end bands next. So today's project is lining the spine of the Song of Songs. So this was done historically with waste parchment or leftovers or something from an old book. So this is actually a test page that I did for really, really small writing. Everything's about 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters high. And so I took that extra page and cut it up, and that is my spine linings for this. Everything is laid down with wheat paste and then repasted over. The wheat paste softens everything and gets everything wet and damp. And that helps a lot with the parchment because it makes it more flexible, and I can mold it to things a little bit better. So today's project is lining the spine of the Song of Songs. So this was done historically with waste parchment or leftovers or something from an old book. So this is actually a test page that I did for really, really small writing. Everything's about 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters high. And so I took that extra page and cut it up, and that is my spine linings for this. Everything is laid down with wheat paste and then repasted over. The wheat paste softens everything and gets everything wet and damp. And that helps a lot with the parchment because it makes it more flexible, and I can mold it to things a little bit better. So I am pasting up the middle of the leather for this book. This is the leather that I dyed using madder and Brazil wood. So I kind of pre-soaked it and wetted it a little bit, and we pasted the middle. Now what we have to do is try and center that up and get it to lay where I want it to lay. Now comes the molding parts. So I've wetted out the leather again, and now what I'm trying to do is I have to press and get the leather stretched in the right way and get it pressed around the bands and laid in, and then I'm going to tie it up with string. We'll see if I can record that a little bit, but that's what. The next phase in binding the book is to actually tie up the bands. So I've actually put this in a press with little pins on the sides of it, and then I'm going to weave back and forth with a cord. This is actually bookbinder's string. And so I'm weaving back and forth, kind of alternating and overlapping so that I get really good pressure on those bands so that it creases them and helps them to mold, and then work that leather. Alright, so the tie-up is done. You can actually see the lines. Those will get dressed up a little bit as we go. But now I have to peel back and trim the head and tail and fold those under and get those finished up. And so we got to get all those pasted. The head and tail have been trimmed and skived down so that they lay in a little bit cleaner. So now I have to paste this, and so after the ends have been trimmed, I'm wetting them out so that things are more pliable and more flexible. Also helps release the paste that's already dried down. So I have to peel this back, paste up the inside of the tab where it folds together, and then the outside of the leather that's now folded under, get everything pasted up, and then kind of mold things, adjust things, get the fold just right so that it goes just a little bit farther than the sewn end bands. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, pasting everything up. I'm finding that I really, really like how paste works, and it's a little forgiving, allows you to rework things and move things and adjust things as you need. There I am kind of fixing the band marking, so that's going to get fixed a little bit later as well. So the spine has been pasted down and the cords molded in with string by tying this up. I'm now wetting out all of the leather again and then going to paste it. So this pasting, I'm going to do both sides, and it's going to happen in 2 stages, where I'm going to paste everything, and this kind of works almost like an interface layer that helps soak up some of the paste, but also soaks up water into the leather and allows things to work and adhere a little bit better. And so here I am adding a little more water, cleaning up the strap, and I'm going to cut the strap slot, and so I have to cut that and then feed that strap through that. I'm trying to keep everything wet, and so it's now time to remove the priming layer of paste, and then put a fresh layer of paste down on that leather and on the book board. And then smooth it back out and kind of press things in, get just an initial adhesion and tack. I put in a layer of baking paper to kind of keep moisture away from the main text block. Doing the same thing on the other side, scraping off that excess, and then adding paste, feeding the strap through, and smoothing that back out. And so cleaning up the squeeze out, there's a little bit of paste that comes out and squidges everywhere. Another layer of paper, smoothing it back out, kind of smoothing the edges, making sure, even though I'm not going to completely cover the round at this point, I want some of the rounded edges of those boards to start to take, and then adding paper. The last step is to get everything put in the press and apply a significant amount of pressure. The next stage is to prep the turn ends. So I'm cleaning things up, trimming everything to width. These are a little thinner than I want because the leather was a little bit askew. Once that's done on the first side, I then do the same thing on the other side. This other side takes a little bit more prep because of the strap. I have to be careful not to cut through that. I laid my brass straight edge under that. All of those are cut, and now I have to trim the corners at a 45-degree angle and get them to thickness. Actually here I cut them a little bit closer than I intended. I usually like to leave a little bit extra when I was trying to cut those a little bit closer, save myself some trouble, which you'll end up seeing in the next video. Caused me a whole lot of extra work. So here I'm wetting out the leather on the turn ends again, just to make sure everything's nice and pliable, and then putting in a liner, and then pasting all of those, putting paste on the wood and on the leather so that things will dry up, and then folding things in, pressing them down, smoothing them out, and squeezing out all of the excess paste and getting that squished. There's a bunch of fighting with the corners because I cut them a little bit close, and then I have to do the same thing with the other side. There's some kind of weird trimming to get everything to fit up because it's unpaired leather, which is what was done historically, and so everything gets folded out, squeeze out, fixed. You can see me fighting the corners. I actually skipped a lot of the fighting once I've stretched them. The last step is to wrap it in parchment paper, put it in cardstock to create a smoothing layer, and put it in the press. So putting on the hardware, first thing I'm going to do is mark out where the pin that comes through the front side goes. And then I'm going to put in the nails that are securing the strap and holding that together. And so putting both of those two nails in to help secure that strap through the wood. And then I cut channels, which you don't see, and then nail down the clip and nail down those brass nails to hold everything together and smooth them out. And I'm drilling the hole for that pin, smoothing out the leather, cleaning up the wood on the backside, carving out a chamfer, and then driving through that pin, and then trimming that to length. Then I have to file all of that down, and I end up filing a notch, which I don't show here, and then measuring the strap length to figure out where to cut that off at. Next is doing the paste downs, and so there's extra pages at the beginning of the book, and so I'm adding paste onto both the boards and that turned in leather, and then on that piece of parchment that is there, and then pressing it down, kind of smoothing it out with my fingers, making sure everything's aligned and adjusted correctly, and then putting in a liner. Doing the same thing on the other side. Remember to actually put my piece of paper there so that I don't get paste all over the place. And smoothed it all out. Added paste, pressed it in, add my liners, and clean everything up, and then wrap it all up and get it ready to put in the press. Actually, I have to have a board with a hole in it. So to get ready to tool, I have to wet out all the leather, did both sides. And so then tooling the leather, I'm just doing all of this is blind tooled with a dry point. And so you could heat up the bronze or brass, but one of the techniques is just to do this while it's wet and just to press in all of the marks in the leather. It makes a more subtle design, but also was historically accurate. Adding lines on the spine. I'm doubling all the lines, adding some dots, marking things out, measuring, and then cleaning things up and pressing it back in. Starting to add diagonals and add the designs. And so a lot of these are tripled lines, which takes, 3 times as long. And going in, adding my markings and my measurements, and then adding all of my additional diagonals. So there's lots of measuring. You can see I'm a little bit left, and that's all.